All right. Well, then I'll tell you we're going live.
Cool. Well, let's go.
Okay. All righty, everybody. Welcome back to the Beehive Biker Podcast. This is episode 24, and we've taken a week or two off for holidays, but we're back, and we have Tony Tucker of Tucker Speed with us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, we're really grateful to have you on. You're someone I really wanted to have on because you're local, and I bring my stuff to you, and you guys do your own podcast, and you just seem like a fun person to have on the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to be on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? I've done a few other podcasts, but yeah, it's always fun to kind of, be the guest for a change.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. Let's go ahead and get to know you a little better. I know you from the shop side of things.
Yeah.
So what got you into motorcycling and what's brought you this far?
I think I had it from the get-go. I have a little Polaroid in my office at the shop of me at about probably 3 or 4 years old, and I'm on this Little Tykes motorcycle.
Nice.
With this big flake red helmet. And I think I just had this fascination with anything that had two wheels from as early as I can remember. And I don't know why. I know that when I was young, my dad was riding motocross, in the early 80s. I don't really remember that because he kind of got out of it. But I don't know if there was just something that triggered something in my brain in those early years. Because I don't really remember that. I remember seeing motocross gear of his laying around the house later on.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Once I recognized that what it was, but he wasn't really doing it anymore. But I just always remember, loving two wheels. And, and even as kids, we grew up riding ATVs and stuff like that. My dad had so many four-wheelers around the house. We would go dune riding and trail riding and all that stuff. But I don't want to say I hated four-wheelers.
Mm-hmm. You just knew what you liked.
I just knew it was too many. You know what I mean?
Right.
So did you guys have any dirt bikes at the time, or was it all just four-wheelers?
It was all four-wheelers. Probably from age, my age, 8 or 9, until about 14, I finally talked my dad into buying me a motorcycle.
Was that kind of his rule, or was that a mom hey, I don't want the kids on motorcycles, but four wheels is enough for me? Or?
No, I don't think it was my mom. I think it was just, I finally got the guts up to be hey, Dad, will you buy me a motorcycle? Rather than a four-wheeler, And so, yeah, I got a 125 dirt bike. That was my first, my motorcycle. I had ridden, we had friends and stuff that had dirt bikes and stuff, and I would ride theirs around. But yeah, that was it. And then from there, I started racing motocross.
Oh, there you go.
I was racing, I raced BMX. I was really into bicycles. That's what we were doing in the neighborhood. We were building wood jumps and dirt jumps. And we got in so much trouble stealing lumber out of new construction,
Someone's trying to build their house and it's where's this sheet of wood we have?
And then they'd look across the street and we have this wooden jump in our driveway. It's not guilty, So yeah, I just always had this love. And so I grew up in kind of the off-road world, motocross, sand dunes, trail riding, and that was the world I grew up in. I didn't really get into Harleys until my early 20s.
Okay.
So
all dirt, all off-road, no street riding.
Growing up, yep. I never rode a street bike, before age 22, 23. Well, I guess maybe 21, 22 in that neighborhood. Yeah. But
was that one you borrowed or was that one you'd gotten?
I had ridden. I had some friends in high school that I rode. I guess I shouldn't. I don't know. Thinking about all this,
it's racking the.
Yeah, it is.
Clearing the cobwebs.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a long time ago. I'm older than I think I am, but yeah, I think I had ridden a few friends, had them in their garage, and we putt around the neighborhood and stuff. But my dad, one of our family friends that we rode with, like off-road, and actually raced with, we drag raced sand stuff as well.
Oh, dang.
and we had a family friend who they bought some Harleys. My dad bought one, and that's really that's when I discovered the Harley world, right? So I went out and got a bike as well, and the rest is history.
So what bikes did your dad and you get?
My dad actually bought, it was a chopper. This was in 2000 or 2001, right in that neighborhood, right around there. Kind of right in the heart of kind of that West Coast choppers, Orange County chopper craze.
The rivalry
days.
or whatever.
And the bike he bought, it was actually called an American Iron Horse. It was kind of like a big dog type chopper. You know, it was based on a soft tail frame with a Evo based motor. And that's what he was riding. His friends, they actually had Harleys. They had like a Road King and a Fat Boy. My first bike that I bought was actually a Suzuki 1500. It wasn't even a Harley.
Was that because a Ford thing? Like, that's what you had the money for?
That's what I had the money for, yeah. And I actually bought it from that same family. One of their sons had bought this Suzuki, and he actually kind of like done some really cool stuff to it. And he was selling it to buy a Harley. Because in that day and age, in that time period, Harley was on like if you wanted to buy a new Harley, there was a waiting list.
Yeah, I was going to say, was that the waiting list period?
Yeah. So it was really hard to buy a Harley. So this friend of mine, Randy, he was trying to buy a Harley, but he had this Suzuki that he'd done some really cool stuff to. And then once his name came up on the list to buy a Harley, he sold me the Suzuki.
He's like, I got to sell this thing fast.
Yeah. And so I bought that, and like he had done some cool, like lowered it and like all the body work, like Frenched in the lights and all this cool stuff. Like, I mean, I look at it now and I'm like, kind of terrible. But it was cool. It was cool, 25 years ago.
Well, I mean, your tastes evolve, right?
For sure. For sure. So, I mean, and the bike was purple too. So wow. Yeah, my first street bike was a purple Suzuki. So there it is.
We should have found that bike we had a podcast episode a couple of weeks ago where we went over different motorcycle colors and like our favorites and whatever. And man, purple was hard. You can't find like a stock purple bike usually.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Snake Venom is like half purple.
Close, yeah. But it was cool back then. At least it was to me. But yeah, that was my first kind of, street bike. And then, that kind of led into, and eventually I knew I was going to buy a Harley. And the next bike I bought was a Harley. So
what? Nice. I'm sure you've been through like a million bikes over the last several years.
Probably not as many as you would think.
Really?
I mean, yeah, it gets a little muddy when you start talking about like once I opened the shop and bikes I was buying like as the shop versus like me personally. Right. You know what I mean? Like then it gets a little.
It's like the shop's bike.
Yeah, it's a shop bike. Is it mine or is it the shop's, or is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, but leading up to that, I sold that Suzuki, or I traded it in actually when I lived in Phoenix, on a Road King. I love the Road King. I still do have like a, special place in my heart for just like a very well done Road King with apes and lowered and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I was gonna say your race bike is base
was a Road King,
police Road King.
It was
right?
a police bike, yeah.
And then I don't know what you call it. Your like FXR styled. Mm-hmm. That one's a Road King too, isn't it?
It started life as a Road King too. So yeah, I kind of have a thing for Road Kings. You know what I mean?
I'm trying to have that kind of life. I've been looking at a couple Road Kings and I'm like, I'd love to make something out of that.
Yeah. So I had my 02 Road King that I bought when I lived in Phoenix, and I had it for 4 or 5 years. I brought it home with me when I moved back to Utah, and I rode it for a few years. I sold it. What did I sell it for? I think I sold it and I bought a snowmobile and a side-by-side, believe it or not.
Oh, complete flip.
Oh, yeah. Just the snowmobile I wanted one. The side-by-side was kind of like a pressure thing from my wife. And my dad was kind of like getting out of Harleys and getting into side-by-sides. And so was my family and stuff.
Was that while you had the shop?
No, this was why I was at the dealership.
Oh, okay.
So I was at the dealership at the time, and I had kids. I have kids. I had young kids at that time, and like the Harley world and kids are not. They just don't work well, right? So like, I bought this 4-seater side by side, and I could throw the kids in the back seat. We could go do a trip and whatever, and it was way more family friendly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was probably the right thing to do at the time. But I went, I think, 2 years without a Harley while I was working at the dealership, which felt like,
An
like,
eternity.
yeah, it just felt like almost like sacrilegious almost. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, you're working on these bikes and you see
Yeah.
it, you're like, man, I like that one.
Yeah.
I can't have this.
so I ended up buying a Sportster, while I worked there. And honestly, it's funny because I go back and I look at photos of that Sporty. This was 2009. I took that Sportster and I bought like a dirt bike exhaust system and modified it to fit the Sportster. And I put like dirt bike handlebars on it and like tall suspension. And I like cut the rear fender to like look like a dirt bike fender. And everybody laughed at me.
Really?
Yeah.
But now, like, a lot of people do that.
Now that's
for,
like super
flat
trendy.
tracking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now it's the thing. But this was 2009. This was, 15 years ago.
See, you were cool before anybody else was cool.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, and I don't want to take credit that I like started it or anything, but
did those pictures end up on the internet?
There's pictures of that bike on Facebook somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's not your flat tracker that you have.
not my
shop?
current one.
Okay.
No, it's a different bike. And like I said, I mean, I remember like the day I finally got that exhaust system bolted on, and like it had like tall shocks, like a dirt track bike, right? And I rode it to work at the Harley shop, and they're just like, "What the hell are you doing?" You know what I mean? Like I converted it all to like dirt bike hand controls. Like it was a lot of work and a lot of like how to convert things. That
I was gonna say. I mean, it's no stock parts.
No, it's like you don't just open the catalog and order like this and that. Like I had to figure some stuff out. And that was fun to me because it was a challenge. Like, how am I going to make this, dirt bike master cylinder and the Harley, rest of the system all work together, right? So it was fun to kind of like challenge myself to do that. And then, it was kind of like almost a joke to some. And now it's like pretty normal.
Yeah.
I was gonna
see
say,
that, you know what I mean?
I mean, when I've seen videos of you racing flat track, like everybody's looks like your bike.
Pretty much. Yeah. So now I have my dirt tracker that sits in the shop. That's a different bike, but yeah.
That's awesome. So you mentioned having bikes as a kid. Did you work on them at all? Is that kind of what started this want to become a mechanic?
For sure. I think, honestly, I think what really kind of like turned on that light bulb for me was RC cars.
Oh, really?
I don't remember how old I was. I was pretty young, like elementary age. And for some reason, I don't even know why, my dad decided we were going to buy RC cars and race them. Like RC cars, like kit cars, like you buy it and you build it and then go race it, right?
These like the gasoline powered ones?
These were battery powered back in the day. I don't even know if gas powered ones were around back then. I don't know, but we were doing battery power stuff.
You've done some.
I've done in
carring.
a little bit of both. I've got about 4 cars right now.
Yeah, so we got into that. I was probably about 5th grade ish when we started that stuff. And I remember the first time he brought home this kit, this box of, a car in a box. And I had done previously I'd done model cars, right? You buy them, you snap the pieces off and you build them, and I was into that stuff as a kid.
Right.
I was like a Lego kid. I loved building stuff as a kid.
Yeah.
But I remember this RC car, we built it, me and my dad, we sat up in the living room in the basement, on a Sunday, and we built this car. And then he bought another one, we built it, and we've, found a local racetrack, and we started racing them on Saturday nights. And that just I think that's where the building and going racing bug really started for me.
Yeah.
I just loved everything from we bought this fishing tackle box with the RC cars that we used as a tool, parts and tools. And I just I loved everything from like laying out the toolbox, like all organized and like the parts and, having all these spares.
Everything had its place.
Yeah. And I just loved it. You know what I mean? And that's really what started, I think the kind of building and working on stuff bug. But then, as we started, drag racing or racing motocross, like I was always working on my own stuff. I always had a fascination with how things worked.
Yeah.
And like just tearing it apart and figuring it out.
Uh-huh.
So how were you funding that journey there? Was that like your dad kind of subsidized some of it? Or?
As a kid, for sure.
Yeah.
As a kid, definitely my dad. I think he's definitely, I'm way more of a gearhead than he is. There was always a little bit of like butting heads. Cause like I talked about, we used to go drag racing with this family that's really into drag racing, right? And he was good friends with that family, but that's what they had a shop. That's what they did for a living, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And my dad he was friends with them. We started drag racing with them, and we go to the races, and maybe we would want to make an adjustment or a change, and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to go ask them what we should do." I'm like, "How about we just figure it out?"
Yeah, I mean, you're your own entity.
I'm like,
man.
I want to figure it out.
Yeah.
He's like, "No, I'll just go ask them." And I'm like, "No, let's figure it out." There's always kind of this battle. Like he just wanted to like, for them to be like, do this.
Right.
And then we would do it. And I'm like, how about we try it our way?
Well, the internet wasn't a thing back then. It's
No,
not like
sure.
you're looking that up like, how do I take this apart? Like,
So there was a battle there, I think, with my dad early on. And I'm the oldest son.
oh, okay.
My younger brothers were doing it too. But it was very much like me and my old man, And there was a point in time where I was just like, we don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
let's figure out our own stuff.
Dad, can't you see it's a competition?
Yeah.
We got to beat them.
They'll always beat us if we do what they say, right?
Uh-huh.
Keep the trade secrets to themselves.
Yeah. So, but my dad was definitely like into like motorsports and racing and, all that stuff. So, and he was funding it. And I think he was enjoying it just as much as we were, I was just fortunate enough that he was passionate about it and wanted to fund it.
Right.
And I got to do all that stuff. So
I wish I had that. My parent, I grew up riding some dirt bikes with my great uncle. Like he had 20 different dirt bikes and whatever, and had every size under the sun. He taught motorcycle riding classes. And so we rode with him, and then I'd come home and be like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, when can I have a motorcycle?" And they're like, "Never."
Yeah.
Like my dad works at the ER in Logan. And, and so he's like, no, you're good. Like you can go ride with Uncle Robert, but that's about it, so it's cool to see that you could enjoy that with your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely had a lot of good times. It's funny now, like my dad's almost totally changed now. Now he's like, you need to quit racing. You need to be careful out there. Like he's almost like 180 from who he was 20 years ago.
Now he sounds like Jeremy's dad.
Yeah,
Hey, get rid of everything,
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to it, but like I'm sure your dad's seen a couple things over the last couple of years, and he's probably a little worried.
Yeah, he's like, hey, you got a business, you got a wife and 4 kids. He's like, you got a lot to think about here. You need to be smart. And I can't say, he's not wrong.
It's always that up and
but I also I have a different outlook on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, why? Like I'm still chasing this like childhood dream of being like a professional motocross racer or a professional like motorcycle racer of some sort.
Yeah.
And I'm still chasing that dream. And it's like I look at my kids now, and my kids aren't really into motorcycles.
Really?
Yeah, none of them are really kind of into it at all. I mean, I have 3 girls and a boy. My boy's not really into it.
Is he your youngest then?
He's my second oldest.
Oh, okay.
He's just not really into bikes. It's just not his thing. I never forced it on him. It's always there if he wants it. He worked at the shop for a year, which was fun, but he just doesn't get excited about motorcycles, right? So he's got his things that excite him, and that's cool. But I'm hoping that what I can show my kids is that, like, if they're passionate about something and that they love something, go do it.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't always have to be responsible.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, just go live your life. Like, you get one shot, you know, don't be on your deathbed and wish, oh, I wish I should have done that. I wish I could have tried this. Like, just go do it.
Yeah. I
And
think
it comes with risk, right?
Right. Well, that's one of the biggest things is that you can't just sit there and live your life in fear,
No.
or else you get nowhere.
Right.
And so, I mean, going out and exploring and, I mean,
Whatever it is you're into.
testing the
go
line.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is how you learn, is how you grow, you know?
Yeah, I mean, just with this show, Zach and I had talked about it for years,
Mhm.
you know, and I'm like, man, does anyone really want to sit and listen to me and him on the internet and listen to us talk about motorcycles? And, you know, we're not expert matter or experts on any specific matter in motorcycling. We just like motorcycling,
Mhm.
you know, but we like bringing people on like you and the people that teach how to ride and people who've been all over the place and hear their experiences. And so I think that's the fun part about this is that not only do we get to just shoot the breeze with some cool people and talk about motorcycles, but, you know, other people get to enjoy it too.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I mean, it's a perfect example. I mean, and obviously, like, a podcast or jumping out of an airplane, you know, are two different things.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But doesn't mean you shouldn't go for both.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, if you would have never done that done your first podcast, you could be sitting there at 75 years old wishing we should have just done it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like no regrets here. Like, just go for it.
Yeah.
It might be scary. It might be hard. You might get into it and not like it. Or it might be different than you think, but go for it and try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was the thing is we just finally decided like now or never, you
Yeah.
know, we need to just get out and do
Yeah.
it.
Quit
So-
talking about it and just be about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
And
is that something that you had to decide when you eventually went to school for becoming a mechanic? Or is
a
that
little bit. I don't know that there was much thought in it at all.
Oh, really?
Like, I mean, and it's probably my bad. Like, I didn't, like, at that time I was 22, 23 years old. You know, I had 2 kids at that time, and, you know, I was working for my dad. I wasn't really going anywhere. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't do any sort of, like, you know, higher education. I didn't go to college.
Mhm.
I barely graduated high school. I really had, like, no direction, right? Like, at that time I was just trying to, like, earn some money to take care of my wife and kids, right? Like, and back in those days, like, I was still a huge, like, supercross, motocross fan, right? And I would watch it, like, on ESPN. They would show it, like, late nights, like, on ESPN2, you could catch, like, races, right?
Mhm.
And in the races, there was these commercials for MMI, you know, and they're super cheesy commercials. Like, you know, it was like a race bike mechanic being like, I wouldn't be here today without MMI on my resume.
This
Yeah.
could be you.
Exactly. and it was just like one day, like, I've been seeing those commercials for years at this point. There was just one day I was just like, screw it.
Let's go.
I'm going. I signed up and didn't even talk to Tori.
No way.
I just, like, signed up. And I was like, hey, we're going to go to Phoenix and I'm going to go to school.
I might get shot if I did something like that.
And kudos to her. She's like,
Okay.
okay, let's go.
That's awesome.
And so we went, and, you know, the rest is history.
And I'm guessing that did you go through any other of their courses or
I
just
didn't.
the Harley?
Just Harley.
You're just like, that's it.
At that point, like, you know, I wish I would have, like, looking back, I wish I would have taken, like, a Honda or a Yamaha program, you know?
Mm.
But at that point, like, I had just gotten that Suzuki. Like, we were, like, just all in, kind of in the Harley world.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to be a Harley mechanic. That's what I wanted to do. And when I signed up, that was my goal, be a Harley mechanic. And so I didn't even look at the other programs, not even realizing it, but like looking back, I'm like, what I really wanted to be was like a factory race bike, like motocross mechanic. Like that's my dream job, right? But I was just like so like wrapped up in this Harley world that I didn't even think about that at the time. I was just like, I'm going to be a Harley mechanic, and that's it.
It's a bug you can't get away from.
I couldn't, man. And I have a friend that when I was in school, he moved into my house. He was going to school as well, and he rented a bedroom from us when we lived in Phoenix. And he was going to school. He was just doing, I think he did Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki while he was there. He got hooked up with some motocross teams, you know, kind of at an amateur level, and then moved up to like this off-road dude, and then got hooked up with KTM. And he ended up being a mechanic for factory Honda Supercross team, like, which in the motocross world is like dream job stuff. Like that team, like factory HRC, like that is like the team. And he got all the way to there. And I'm like, you got my dream job. And I'm here working on these shitty Harleys, you know what I mean? But he looks
they leak all over the place.
Yeah. And you know, he looks at me and he's like, man, now that you have like your own shop, you're doing your own thing, you're going racing. He's like, you got the dream job. I'm like, I don't know.
It's always the pasture's greener on the other
for
side.
sure.
Right?
It definitely is. Yeah.
Difference in perspective.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So you finished school, and then did you immediately come back, or did you start working down there?
No, I was ready to come home. Like I think I left like graduation. It was like on like a Saturday at like noon, and we were on the road by like 4:00. Like we were
Arizona's
loaded.
not your speed.
Well, it wasn't so much that. Like I liked Phoenix. I enjoyed it. My oldest daughter though, I have with another girl. Like,
Okay.
so it's not mine and Tori. So and she was still here in Utah, and I was missing her. I was ready to get home to her. But also, so when Tori moved down there with me, she got a job with the company she was working with in Phoenix.
Oh wow! So that's
they
nice.
they
So
transferred her, right?
Stick around.
Mm-hmm. So when we moved down there, they just transferred her to their Phoenix location. But when we were in Phoenix, it was like she was working in the mortgage industry.
Okay.
And it was like leading into that like recession in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So they actually closed their Phoenix branch before I was done with school. So we were kind of faced with this decision when we were in Phoenix. She's either going to be, she had two options, either lose her job or move back home and come back to their corporate office.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And so we were kind of stuck, like, what's the best thing to do? And we kind of decided, like, okay, I'm going to be coming home, trying to get a job, but I'm not going to have a job when I get home.
Yeah.
At least one of us needs to have a paycheck,
Yeah.
you know, kind of guaranteed money. So she decided that she was going to move home like 6 months before I did, so I could finish school. So her and our son, Jer, moved home. I stayed in Phoenix for the last 6 months alone. I mean, just me and Rich, my roommate. And that was hard. That was hard for me.
I believe it.
And so, yeah, like come graduation day, I was like,
Bye.
I'm out of here. I was packed the day before and ready to rock.
No, I totally understand that. So I'm National Guard, and
Mhm.
I went through, I think all in all, like start to finish, like flying out to flying home was like 7.5 months, 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the hardest thing. Being yelled at drill sergeant sucks, but not seeing my kid at the end of the day and my wife,
Yeah.
like that sucks even more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that was the best part, was just being able to come home.
For
Plus,
sure.
I liked Texas, but all I got to experience was like the military Texas,
Mhm.
military end of things. And then I'm like, I just need to get back to Utah.
Yeah.
Like, I just like Utah so
Yeah.
much. I
Yeah.
don't want to leave.
Yeah, that's how I was, man. And I was so ready to get home. So yeah, I worked in a metric dealership while I was down there, while I was in school.
Is that kind of like a clinical or I don't know what they call it, like an internship so you can finish off your schooling there?
It wasn't part of the job or anything.
Oh, really?
It was just like I when I moved down there, like Tori I had a job, and I wasn't going to not work, even though like school was like 7 hours a day. I'm like, well, there's plenty of other hours in the day I can still work, right? So
sure.
I was trying to get a job in like a Harley dealership because that's what I was doing, at school. Couldn't get a job, and I tried in like some of the aftermarket or independent shops down there. And I mean, honestly, there were a number of like independent shops. Like when I moved down there and was like just going around looking for work, I'd walk up to the front door and they would just have a sign on the front door that says, "We are not hiring."
Oh, wow.
Because you got to realize MMI is in Phoenix.
Oh, okay.
There's 200 kids.
Yeah. Everybody wants
showing
to work
up
there.
Every 6 weeks. There's a new rotation of 200 kids that show up in town.
Sorry, yeah, that makes way more sense.
So
they're like, no, we're good.
I could only imagine like you could just get overwhelmed with every 6 weeks, just this wave of people coming through looking for work.
Yeah.
Right. So I get it. So yeah, like same thing in the Harley world. Like it was just, in Phoenix, the technician world in Phoenix is different because of the school. There's this like almost this like revolving door of mechanics in the dealerships down there.
Just a little oversaturated.
So
do they have a higher turnover rate because of that? Like they're just like, hey, I can go anywhere else? Or I guess you'd think that people would want to hold on to their job once they get it.
Yeah, but I think that the dealerships are like reluctant to pay decent wages because they're like, if you don't like it, there's a line going out the door that it's willing to take the job. And then that guy will come in because he wants the job. And then like 6 months, he's like,
oh man,
this kind of sucks. I need to make more money. And he leaves and they just shuffle in the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at least that's how it was when I was there. This was, 04, 05.
Can you believe it's been 20 years?
No, it's kind of crazy. It's wild to think that I've been working in the industry for that long. Because like I said, when I moved down there, I got the job I ended up getting was at like a Yamaha. They were Yamaha Suzuki Polaris dealer. And I just figured like, I need a job.
Yeah.
And I'll take it. It was as a salesman too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You weren't even in the shop.
No. It was as a salesman.
How'd you like that?
It sucked.
Desperate times call for desperate measures.
It was fun. And I'm glad I did it because I kind of learned a little bit about that side of the industry. I learned a lot. I did it for about 6 months, and then I moved into their parts department, which was cool. So then I got to see like how another side of a dealership runs.
Yeah.
And then when I moved home, I became a tech. And so it's like I kind of spent time like in every department, right?
Yeah.
Which I think helped me once I moved out on my own.
Right.
That's what I was going to say. This is all experiences that are leading up to what you have
Where I'm
now.
at now. Right.
Yeah.
So you finished up, you came home. How quick did you immediately move into working for Golden Spike at the dealership?
I didn't. Golden Spike wasn't even a thing.
Oh, really?
At that time. It was actually called Harley Davidson of Northern Utah in those days.
Was it in the same location or where were they at the time?
Do you know where their old building is?
I don't.
So their old building is further, I guess it'd be kind of northwest on Riverdale Road. Like
okay.
Way down the hill. You know where McDonald's is on Riverdale Road?
Yeah.
It's like kitty corner from them. There's a Key Bank on the corner.
Oh.
And there's a building behind Key Bank. That's the old Harley building.
Huh.
And that building, it has been there for years. I think they opened it in like the 90s. And then they moved out of there in 15 and moved to the location they're at now.
So were they bought out? Is that why they changed the name or?
Yeah, that's kind of a long, complicated story. I mean,
we don't have to do.
No, I don't mind. I mean, it's just, I don't know what kind of time you got, but anyways, so it was owned by a gentleman back then. He was he had to sell off Ogden and Logan.
Okay, so he owned multiple.
He owned all four on the Wasatch Front: Salt Lake, South Valley, Ogden, and Logan.
Okay.
He currently owns all four again.
Oh, really? So he
owned
Intermountain.
It's Intermountain Harley. Okay. It was that group. They owned all four. He had to peel off two of them because this was pre-Timpanogos. And there was like some sort of, this is all rumor. I don't know how true and accurate this is. This is just what I heard through working at the dealership. But I guess there was a corporate rule that he had a monopoly on a certain amount of territory that violated some corporate policy. So there was kind of an ultimatum made. You sell off 2 of your dealerships or we're going to plant one in the middle of them with
really?
a new owner, right?
Do you know where they were thinking about putting that?
Like Layton, Kaysville.
Huh.
So he sold off Ogden and Logan to a new owner. That took place in January of 07. So I moved home in 06.
Okay.
And was applying at that dealership. They just weren't hiring. I kept going in. I was going in probably once a month. Like, hey, still looking for work.
So are you an Ogden original? You from Ogden?
I'm from, I grew up in Layton.
Oh, okay.
I'm like kind of Davis County kid, and I grew up in Layton. I still live in Layton now.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
So you commute over to Ogden?
I do, yeah. So I've always worked in Ogden, but I've always lived in Layton. It's just the way it is. So, so yeah, I was applying at the Ogden store under the first owner. They weren't hiring. Then the buyout happened January 1st of 07. And half of the staff from Ogden went to Salt Lake because the owner was like, I'm taking you, and we're going to Salt Lake.
He wanted his best hands.
He took his best guys. So the new owner, Brent, he had to come in and he had a bunch of spots to fill. But they didn't have my resume because my resume went to Salt Lake, right? So they were looking for, and in the meantime, I didn't know all this was happening. I didn't know there was a buyout happening. I didn't know there was new owners. I didn't know any of this. All I knew was I kept going in there, and after a while, I was kind of like, man, they're just not calling me. So I kind of slowed down on stopping by, right? Because I had been stopping in there for 6 months, no calls, no interest.
So this whole time you thought they had your resume and they didn't.
And then, so yeah, January 1st happens. I'm like, they have my resume. Like, I'll check in with them at some point. And hadn't really, you know what I mean? And so I think it was March or April of 07. My dad goes down to the Harley shop to buy a new bike. And he buys a new Street Glide. And he's sitting in the office with the sales manager and says, hey, now that I bought my bike, are you going to hire my son? And they're like, well, who's your son? It was like, well, he, went to MMI. He's been applying down here. And they're like, well, we don't have his resume. Have him call us. So my dad leaves there and calls me. He's like, hey, like, I just bought my bike. Like, you need to call these guys. I'm like, they have my resume.
It was part of his sales contract.
Yeah.
To hire my son.
So I called them and they're like, yeah, come down for an interview. Like, hell yeah. So I go down there and interview and they hired me on the spot.
Dang.
But
job's yours. Here you go. Get working. Here's some wrenches.
Pretty much. That's pretty much how it went. Because like I said, the previous owner had taken a bunch of hands. And they didn't have any resumes, any applications because they had nothing.
Yeah.
So they didn't even have anybody to be calling. So they were trying to fill these spots and they were kind of like desperate for resumes and applications. And
did you ever run into anyone that was in a similar situation as you, that they had been applying and then that too happened to them where they took the resumes?
Not that I remember, not that I recall. Because there's not that many people that go through MMI and then come back to Ogden, right? Like the fact that I had MMI training and then was in Ogden ready to work, like automatically made me like
top of the list. So is that not a prerequisite for working as a mechanic?
It's not prereq at all.
Oh, really?
But
I would have thought that because they're like a certified dealer, they require that you're a certified technician.
You would walk in there with no experience. If they were that desperate, they might hire you.
Dang.
They'd have to be really desperate.
Zach, it's your turn. Your chance, man.
But no, definitely not. Now, there is incentives. So MMI, when you go through MMI, there's like, it's Harley certified training. Like Harley has their own, what they call Harley Davidson University. They have their own curriculum.
Yeah.
And it's all taught at MMI. Like when you come out of MMI, you have reached a certain, like there's levels in HDU and like you're at a certain level already when you come out of MMI. There's further levels to get to be like a master tech.
Is that training you take like from Harley Davidson?
That's additional training that like once you're in a dealership, you take classes and you earn the next levels. Yeah. but you come out of MMI at a certain level, and a dealership has like incentives, like the higher the levels of all their technicians, like they get more points, and they build these points, and it determines how many new motorcycles your dealership is allotted for like the next model year.
Oh, really?
So like, and it's the same in the parts department. There's like certain scoring systems, and same with motor clothes and sales. There's like ways of like earning points to like incentivize you to do better. And if you do better, you get more motorcycles next year.
So I guess that's one of the questions I've had about Harley Davidson dealers. Like you have the franchise, like the owner creates a franchise, but is it like also partly funded by Harley when they award that franchise? Like, are they sending money, or are they just like, hey, you're allowed to sell our bikes? Like
Pretty much.
they're not helping fund any like marketing, or
They're not
for the
paying
local-
for, they may front the money, but they're going to get it back. It's not free of charge.
Right.
They might finance it.
Gotcha.
They might act as the bank.
But they want
They're
the money
not
back.
they're not giving you anything. Yeah.
Nothing's free for Harley Davidson.
No. I mean, corporations just don't don't become corporations like, otherwise they'd be called charities, right? If they were just giving money out. So yeah, I think, and I can't speak too much on that. I mean, I have I spent 8 years in the dealership, the last 3.5 at management level. So I learned quite a bit, but yeah, I think when you own a dealership, your hands are really tied. You know what I mean? They'll tell you how to look, how to act, what you can do, what you can't do, all that type of stuff.
Are they kind of have to bend to the will of the corporate entity at that point? Is that?
Well, a corporate entity will just tell you as the franchise, or it's not really franchise, it's dealership. It's kind of the same, but different. Franchise, you sell hamburgers. At a dealership, you sell like some sort of vehicle, right? Like that's the big difference. It's just wording. But yeah, they just, the motor company tells the dealerships, this is how you have to look. This is how you have to act. This is the way you're supposed to do things. You can't do this. You can't do that. For better or worse, I think for worse, Harley's making all their dealerships look alike, and I don't think it's good.
It'd be nice to have different variety,
It used to be that way.
Like they had their heart and soul at each dealer.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I kind of like about what is it? Summit now. Is that, I mean, it's in the old, what was that? Was that a granary or? Can't remember.
They built that. They built that building. That building was never anything before.
Oh, really?
It was all constructed out of recycled steel from the steel mill.
Oh, okay.
That was down the street or whatever. And then constructed to look as though it was like that.
Oh, okay.
The owner who built that building spent so much money on that building, and he ended up spending like going bankrupt building it essentially, and then had to sell the business because of it.
Did Intermountain ever own them? The when it was Timpanogos? Or who?
To my understanding, I think Intermountain owned the building and the dirt, but never the operation. Now that's just rumor as well. I don't know how true that is, and from what I've heard, they no longer do.
Right. Yeah. Well, from how I understand it, is that when I went there last, when they did the whole change, some guy, I guess, that owns a bunch of dealerships in California, or actually around the nation.
It's the whole country. Yeah.
It's
actually two brothers.
Yeah.
It's two brothers. That I think it's TMZ or TMC. It's two brothers, and I think they own like 30 dealerships.
So they obviously don't have those rules about owning too many dealerships or in the same location.
Not anymore. Well, the rules about like having a monopoly in a certain amount of like given territory, maybe that rule applies. So like that group couldn't own every dealership in the state. But there's nothing that says they can't own one in every state.
Yeah.
I think it's terrible for the industry, honestly.
Which part in specific?
Those groups buying the dealerships.
Oh, not letting it be local. Or...
and that's becoming more and more common. They're not the only ones. The dealership that I worked at in Phoenix, that metric dealership, it's called it's part of the Ride Now group. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. I think they own 50 dealerships around the country.
Holy cow.
I am curious, now that you brought that up, what you think about Young Power Sports around here. Because I feel like they bought literally everybody that's metric. There's
either them or Carl Malone has.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Yeah, because I feel like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago was like the Young Power Sports behind the mall in Ogden and
The one in Layton.
And then all of a sudden, every single, like in Logan, I think there's only one that's private that's on the north end of town. And then everything else has been
bought up by Youngs.
And then everything, you're driving down the interstate, you see like 16 Youngs.
Yeah. They bought everything in Bountiful, Centerville, and like the other one in Ogden, Triple ADS. They were bought by Carl Malone. Carl Malone, I think, bought what's the one in like Draper? There's a couple, and he owns a handful in Heber City, and they're just buying them up. And I personally don't like it. I mean, I don't have anything against the Youngs, and I actually know their family. I went to school with them. And I know them, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with them. I just think I just don't think that's good for the motorcycle business.
It just seems kind of like you said, there's nothing really necessarily wrong with it, but it just kind of sucks that it doesn't feel like the hometown dealership or the hometown shop anymore.
Yeah, call it, what you want, ma and pa, or I mean, that makes it sound like it's small.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to say that a dealership couldn't be a large scale dealership, but be owned by a family, and that family's personality is expressed in their shop, right?
Right.
Those dealerships still exist around the country. I've been fortunate enough to get to know some of them, and there's still some around the country, but they're getting fewer and fewer. One of the ones I love the most is Suburban Harley Davidson. They're just outside of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. It's a family-owned dealership. Joe, who's the current owner now, I've gotten to know him through the Bagger Racing League.
Okay.
He loves racing. He's a racer at heart, right? He used to race flat track. He's raced dirt bikes. He's raced all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
His family owns this dealership. They have one dealership. It's very successful, very big dealership, but their dealership is an expression of their family.
Yeah.
And we go to the BRL races, and who's there building the bikes and working on the bikes and changing tires? Joe, the dealership owner.
Mm-hmm.
He's laying on the ground changing oil or changing tires. Like that's a passionate motorcycle dude.
Yeah.
Who's running a dealership. Like, and that's just not common anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like the guys who own Summit, like they're sitting in some high rise, the top of the, corporate, they have all these people underneath them. They're wearing a suit and tie to work every day. Like
they don't look like they ride Harley Davidsons.
They might ride, but I don't know if I would call them enthusiasts. I would call them businessmen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's different. Those businessmen can run a hell of a business, though.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
If they couldn't, they wouldn't have 40 dealers.
Right.
So why do you think that is, that a lot of these shops that are more local or dealers that are more local are selling off to these larger companies? Is it just the ease of like, hey, if I just sell out, I don't have to do this? Because it can't be easy running these kinds of operations.
No, it's a hard business. And it's getting harder and harder. You know what I mean? The internet doesn't make anything easier on a local level, right? Like trying to run a brick and mortar store.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these family-owned dealerships, like the dealership behind the mall, Newgate Honda and Layton Cycle, they were owned by the same person for years. I know because I was racing motocross and I was buying ATV parts as a kid, and those were my stores. They were owned by a family. That guy was getting up there in age, doesn't really have kids that really want to run it. And if someone wants to come in and be like, hey, we're going to write you a fat check.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of it's a no-brainer.
I could imagine that being really easy, just because it's not like maybe some people don't think about retirement and stuff like that when they're running a business. It's, you know, you don't have the 401k from the company that you're putting in on, or
I'm that
any
guy
sort
right
of
now.
retirement.
I'm
Yeah.
that guy. I don't have any, like, everything I have is wrapped up in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a 401k.
Yeah.
I have no savings. Everything I have, I mean, I have, you know, a couple $100,000 in inventory sitting in my shop. Like
Mhm.
everything I have, I've put into that business.
Yeah.
And that's it. So yeah, if I do this for another 10, 20, 30 years and I still have nothing and someone wants to come in and be like, hey, we're going to write you a fat check, you know.
Well, and especially where you said at the moment, you know, none of your kids are interested in
Not really.
picking it up.
Yeah, not really. So, I mean, and I think that's probably the situation in a lot of, you know, whether they're independent shops or actual dealerships, they're
Mhm.
probably the guys who own like one or two dealerships, they're probably in that very similar situation. They probably haven't been smart with their money
Yeah.
and put it in a 401k because they're gearheads and they're racers and they're enthusiasts and they've blown all their money on race bikes and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, and there's days where I'm like, am I really being smart about this? Should I be putting money away rather than building another race bike?
All right.
But then I'm like, man, I love racing. Let's just go
Yeah.
racing. You know what I mean? I'll worry about retirement when I get there.
Right.
Well, you bring up brick and mortar. So
Mhm.
what brought you from working at a dealership to starting your own, and kind of run us through that process? Like, starting a business is scary. There's all these things you got to think of. There's probably tons of things you need to think about that you don't even know you need to think about.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
I guess maybe in the back of my mind somewhere, I always knew that I wanted to have my own store or own shop or my own something.
Mhm.
It's what my dad did. It's what my grandpa did before him. My great grandpa did before him. They were in the gas business. They had, my great grandpa and my grandpa had service stations back when service stations were a thing. That kind of morphed into like the more modern day convenience store
Mhm.
type model that my grandpa he went through that change from service to convenience store. And that's what my dad did. And I worked for my dad for 7 years at his station. Hated it at the time, right? But what I didn't know at the time, but looking back now, I was absorbing all this information on how to run your own business.
Mhm.
All while hating being there, not really trying to learn it. I was just like engulfed in that. Like I grew up in my grandpa's store. Like we would run around there and steal penny candy and
Penny candy. Where did that go?
I don't know, man. I miss it. But you know, and he would have like fishing lures hanging on the back wall, and we'd steal them and go fish in the river. Like we just I hung around that stuff, and I was just absorbing what, like I remember, like, you know, we would eat dinner, and my dad and my uncles and my grandpa, they'd be talking about business, and they would be talking about like, we can't buy that, you know, gas prices are too high, we're not making any money. They're talking about profit margins, and they're talking
Mhm.
about this, and it was just like, that was just like, you know, in my vocabulary at a young age.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there was a time where I thought that was going to be what I was supposed to do,
Mhm.
just go into the gas station business, because it just felt like my great grandpa did it, my grandpa did it, my dad did it. That's what I'm supposed to do. Right. And my dad kind of talked me out of it, you know, pretty young. I don't think he purposely talked me out of it, but he just said that he thinks that it's the end of like, it's the same thing with the dealerships, kind of just a guy or a family owning a store and it being their career is just going away.
Mhm.
My dad was one of the, you know, last of a dying breed of just like, he had a store and that's what he did. Like kind of like the single store model is kind of gone.
Right. So it wasn't like a 7-Eleven or a Maverick or.
I mean, he was a Chevron station.
Chevron. Yeah. Like the
But-
fuel
but-
is one thing, but then the station
The station was his.
Right.
It was his. It was not a, you know, it wasn't owned by a big chain or corporation or whatever. It was just his store. He sold Chevron. He had a contract with Chevron. He sold their fuel. Everything he sold, like, it was him. It was his. he did it his way, and so yeah, like once, I guess I always knew that was the direction. And then, I kind of dove off onto this, motorcycle mechanic adventure, and it was great. I loved it. I went through the dealership, and then, after 8 years at the dealership, I was ready for a change. And that's when conversations and talks about opening my own place started. And then I just kind of had to just go for it. I mean, just kind of like you guys in the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to quit talking about it and just start being about it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Tori was very supportive of you going to school. Was this same support, just like, hey, this is the next thing we need to do and start this business? Or
Yeah, her and I'll even give credit to her mom. Almost pushing me, pushing me to do it. I mean, because I'm probably a lot like you guys. I was very, very nervous, very scared and apprehensive, to the point where I probably would have never made the leap.
well, how old were you?
This was 10 years ago, so I'd have been about 32, 34.
Okay.
You know what I mean? 4 young kids,
Yeah.
a mortgage, like, and to kind of dive into that story, I didn't just leave the dealership and start the shop. It didn't happen that way. Kind of, how we talked about that whole dealership ownership change.
Mm-hmm.
It was sold to Brent. Brent got in some financial troubles and ended up having to, try and he needed to be bailed out. Well, and guess who comes back into the picture is the owner who owned it originally.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, Timpanogos came in. That rule was kind of like no longer an issue. So Joe was able to come in and buy back in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still there. And I just I wasn't happy because I was still there when that ownership change happened again. And I was kind of like fed up and kind of just felt like I had spent my time there. And then when that happened, that was really kind of like the nail in the coffin, for me to start really thinking about what I want to continue to do.
Yeah.
I didn't have a set plan yet for my shop. I just knew it was time for me to leave there. Like something just told me that it was time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for me to decide that. I mean, the last day, the day I left that dealership and walked out, like I bawled my eyes out. I was a wreck. Like I felt like I was leaving my identity behind me. Like I had really kind of like poured my heart and soul into what I was doing there. Like I was pretty passionate about everything I was doing there.
Yeah.
And it was hard to leave, but just something was telling me that I had to go. So I left there. I actually got a job in like an aerospace, like manufacturing plant down here in Ogden, just on their maintenance team.
Mm-hmm.
Just to keep money coming in. And in the meantime, I started putting a plan together on opening a shop. So actually, me and my brothers kind of started it all together. And, when we first opened the shop, we got a building, we got our business license, and we were just starting to tinker on some bikes here and there. But all 3 of us, there was me and my 2 brothers, we all had we kept our day jobs.
Oh, so it was just an after hours.
It's an after hours project.
Operation.
Mm-hmm. And then it kind of turned into after hours to like, okay, well, one of us can be here while the other 2 at work.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the next day, one of us would be there while the other 2 at work. Like we kind of like were able to like work out this weird kind of schedule.
Rotating cast.
Yeah, a little bit. All while, trying to keep our day jobs, if you will, if you want to call it that. And then, and then just get the shop moving. So we got really busy right off the bat, super busy. I mean, I kind of had like a lot of connections and a lot of like I had, gotten to know a lot of people in the industry. Right. So like a lot of people kind of like, they're like, oh, you're opening your own shop.
Just
they kind of followed me over there, which was a huge advantage.
Yeah, I'm sure you had customers that knew you from working on their bikes, and then they're like, hey, I like the way he operates. I'm going to go to him.
Yeah. And kind of word kind of spread that, even if they didn't know I was opening my own shop, like that, the word kind of spread around town, and we got really busy really fast. So like, it was about, 9-10 months later where we were just like, I got to quit my day job and I got to come here full time.
Yeah.
I have no time
and
for all these bikes.
That's when it got scary for me. Like, it wasn't scary starting the shop, right? Because I had a day job. I had a paycheck.
Jumped off the cliff at that point.
I was just kind of dangling still.
Mm-hmm.
But the day I quit my day job and was like, all right, this is it.
Yeah.
That was the nerve-wracking day. And, that was, like right, I think started 2015. We opened in 14 or we opened at the end of 14. So this would have been like fall of 15 is when we started thinking about that. And I went full time in short order. About 3-4 months after that, my youngest brother, TJ, we were like, I needed help. So I was there full time, just me. And then they would come in like after hours and we still weren't keeping up. And my brother TJ quit his day job and came full time. And me and TJ just went full on for 2-3 years. Yeah.
So was that mostly just like main PMs, like preventative maintenance and changing oils and maybe adding some handlebars on, or were you doing the builds that you kind of do nowadays?
I don't think we were doing the builds to the level we are today, for sure. And we were also not just working on Harleys in those first years.
Oh, really?
We were working on
anything that comes.
We were taking it. I mean, I was scared shitless. I don't know if you want me to swear or not, but
we'll put some quacks on.
Yeah,
no worries.
But I was like, I'll take anything and I can get my hands on. Right?
Yeah.
Dirt bikes, ATVs, whatever. I would say no to watercraft and snowmobiles because I didn't want to touch them.
Mm-hmm.
But dirt bikes, ATVs, like I could deal with that. So I was taking that stuff in. We had a lot of work. I knew eventually I wanted to weed that other stuff out and just be a Harley shop.
Yeah.
I just knew that I needed to make sure we were going to be able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I was going to be able to make it first. So we ran that way for a couple of years and then slowly started to weed off. I think we first weeded off like off-road. Like anything off-road, like we'll just kick it.
Four-wheelers, dirt bikes.
Yeah. But we were still taking in like a sport bike or a, say a Yamaha Cruiser or whatever. We were taking that stuff in. And then eventually we were like, okay, if it's not a Harley, we don't really want to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with time, like now we're even more selective than that. Now it's like, if it's not of a certain age or if it's a certain style or whatever, I might not want it anyways. So now I can be a little more selective than just Harley.
Mm-hmm.
So
is it pretty easy to work on those bikes, even though you hadn't gone to school for them? Is there just kind of basics for mechanics that it made it easy to work on those, or were there still some things that were unique to those motors? And
they're definitely
bikes?
they're different enough. They're definitely there's Harleys and then there's everything else, right? If you're a mechanic, you can, and if you're a good mechanic, you can figure them out.
Mm-hmm.
But having to figure them out is not profitable.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you were to bring me your Yamaha for a major repair, and let's say like, because the business kind of operates off of job times, like that job, pays you, 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours or
it's like
whatever.
a piecework.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's if you know how to do the job. Now, if I have to figure it out, that 6-hour job is probably going to take me 18 because I'm going to have to like research it and read on it and figure, I can figure it out. I'm not going to but at the end of it, I'm not going to make any money. So it's just not profitable.
Right.
So it's like, if you want to be profitable, stick to what you know and that you can do efficiently and just focus on that. And that's where I tried to get to.
And were your brothers, did they go to school at all? Or you just like, hey, this
Zero
is
training.
Hey,
I mean, other than
be
like,
my hands.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, my brother TJ was really hands-on. He's very mechanical. He's a smart technician. I'll call him a technician at this point. But at that point, he had done nothing more than work on his own stuff. And so I kind of took him under my wing and trained him and taught him everything I could. And he picked up on it all really quick. So much so that he's doing his own thing now. He works out of his own garage.
So he doesn't work for you guys anymore?
Nope, he's gone.
Just doing things for fun on the side, or is he full-time that in his own
He
garage?
full-times it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And your other brother?
Kind of out of the industry altogether.
Yeah.
He has an engineering degree and he's got a really good job. It never really made financial sense for him to get into the motorcycle industry. And we kind of saw that early on. So he parted ways to kind of focus on his career path. He's super smart, really smart guy. I think he lacked the passion to give up the pay that he was, could be potentially making on that career path that he was already in.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Nope, you're good.
I was just thinking that's definitely something pretty common thing that we've heard with interviewing people is like, gotta love it.
You gotta love it.
Like, yeah, it'll make ends meet, but you gotta love it.
You gotta love it. Yeah, it's 100% true. And I've talked to so many guys over the years now. I've had guys come to me and say, "Hey, you think I should go to school?" And then they go to school and then they come out and they get a job and then they're gone already. Like it's crazy. I've seen guys go through that entire process from deciding to go to school, come home, get a job, and fizzle out.
They just work like a year and
they're just like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And it's not all, rock star and partying and like it kind of looks like from the outside sometimes. I mean, it's just work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's very like thankless. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't matter how hard we try. It just almost seems like it's never good enough for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hard. Like Jason that works for me.
Yeah.
He went through that whole process.
Because he got out of the Air Force, right?
He came out of the Air Force, had a GI Bill, and was like, "Hey, I kind of maybe want to be a Harley mechanic as my second career here. Do you?" And he came to me like the first or second year we were in the shop.
So you didn't even know him before that?
No, I mean he was a customer at the dealership, and we had kind of crossed paths, but not really. We never really connected, But he knew of me. I'll admit I didn't remember him, And he came to me at the shop. He's like, "Hey, man, like you worked at Harley." And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to school." I'm like, "You should do it, man. You should go." Like, and I kind of gave him the rundown of what to expect. I'm like, "Don't go do it unless you are passionate, like, and go there with like the intent to learn. They're not going to force feed you this stuff. You got to go extract it out of them." And so he decided he was going to go to school. He kind of interned. He's like, "Hey, man, do you care if I just come down here and just like work for free for 6 months before I go to school?" I'm like, "Yeah, would love to have your help." Like in those days, I could definitely use free help, right? Early in the business. So I'm like, "Yeah, man, if you could come down, I'll put you to work doing whatever you can." So he did. And then he went to school and he came back and worked for me, got totally burned out, quit, went back to work on base, and after about 2 years back on base, was like, "Screw this, I'm going back to the motorcycle world," and is now back at the shop.
I feel like he's told me this before because we've talked military stuff before, and so I'm pretty sure he's mentioned that.
Yeah, he probably has. I mean, he's not afraid to say it. I mean, and I'll admit, I'm probably one of the biggest reasons he burned out so quick, because he came back in a time where we were grinding at the shop, like we were working 7 days a week, and like long hours. And I was like so driven in those like first 5 years, like so afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, we're just going to go. And it's the same reason my little brother kind of got fed up with me, if you will. He was just like, "I just can't do it. I can't go at this pace anymore." And he kind of got over it. And he's like, I love doing it, but I don't want to do it at this pace anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I burned him out. I'll admit it, and it's my fault. I just was grinding, and I like probably it probably wasn't the right thing for me to do, to like almost force them to grind that hard with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the time, like I thought we were a team, and we were like running towards the same goal, not realizing that like maybe what they were trying to get out of it was something different than I was.
Mm-hmm.
So like after Jay left, and then the next year my brother left, I had to really do some self-reflecting on like how I was operating and how I was treating these people that were there.
Yeah.
Like, wait, they might be passionate about working on this, but this is just a job to them. It's not their business, and I can't make them work like it's their business.
Yeah.
And I had to be like, okay, I need to change some things here. And I learned a lot from, I think, unfortunately kind of burning out those guys. Luckily, I was able to get Jay back, which has been great, because he's just, he's one of my best friends, and I just love having him there. So,
well, it seemed like he was running the front end a lot too on the side. Like he was in the back, and then somebody'd come in, he's up the front. But now do you guys kind of rotate?
Well, he's kind of been, and that's the beauty of Jay, is that he kind of like, because he was there in the beginning, we didn't really have like structured roles in the beginning. We were all just kind of like just doing everything
Everywhere.
we can, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was doing a little bit of everything. And then as I kind of went through that like self-reflection, I'm like, okay, like I need to have like a guy, like this is his job, and then this is this guy's job, rather than everybody just like randomly running around trying to do everything. I had to kind of like create some structure. And when he was working for me before, he was kind of like wrenching, but he would answer the phones, he would look up his own parts, like just doing a little bit of everything. Then when he left, by the time he came back, I had some roles, right? And I first brought him back as my counter guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hey man, how about you just come back, be my service writer? Like, that's all I need you to do, just service write. Call customers, look up parts, order parts, schedule out jobs. Like, you'll just do everything at the front counter. And he did that for about a year. And then we had a technician that we had to let go, and it left us short in the shop because and we had to let him go like right in the middle of riding season. And that's tough because there's times in the summertime where we have like 6 weeks of work scheduled, right? And we have 6 weeks of work scheduled anticipating that we have that extra guy here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So now all of a sudden we lose that guy. All this work's still coming in thinking we have like 3 techs and we only have 2, and we got buried. So Jay was like, hey, Tori kind of stepped up, said, hey, I'll try and manage the front. Jay, you go help him in the back, because we were just drowning in the shop.
So was she working for, like, were you guys all working together from the beginning, or was she still doing her normal job at the beginning?
Tori?
Yeah.
She had a day job, a regular job. She wasn't really involved in the operations in the first couple of years. When my one brother left, she kind of stepped in and started to part-time with us. She started, because my one brother was doing a lot of the administrative kind of back end stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of came in and was doing that part-time while she still had a day job. And then when my youngest brother left, it might have been when Jay left in 2018, she's just like, I'm ready for a change. I don't like my day job. How about I just come to the shop full-time? And then she's been full-time there ever since. And she's kind of been bouncing around. Like, she's never wrenched, but she kind of came in and will service ride or look up parts or sell merchandise. And then she's doing kind of the admin stuff. So
Does she do a lot of the marketing as well, or is
that's all Jordan?
It's all Jordan.
That's all Jordan. She doesn't do any marketing at all. She, she pays the bills. She places all the orders. She deals a lot with the customer service side of stuff, as far as, like if returns or warranties and all that type of stuff. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And, she's got her hand a little bit in kind of our e-commerce business at this point. So she does a lot. She's got a lot on her plate. She actually still has another job. She's got.
Oh, really?
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. She hides it well, but she has like a work from home job.
Okay. I was going to say, I've never not been there, and she's not.
She's there. She's there 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
She's there Tuesday through Saturday. But she has a work from home job that she does from the shop too.
Okay.
So, and we're talking, she's ready to quit that, and we're ready to quit it. The extra money every month is nice, though. The one big reason that we keep hanging on to that job, or she keeps hanging on to it, is health insurance.
Yep.
All of our health insurance is through that company right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lose that, we're going to be paying for it out of pocket. And that's probably a bigger hit than the pay that we'll lose, right? So we're trying to figure that. And that's just the challenges of being self-employed.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I was saying, like Jay, like he's become a jack of all trades. When he moved back into the shop, when we had to let that guy go, he was kind of enjoying being back on the wrench side of things, and we decided to just keep him back there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hired, Steve, who's at the front counter now, and now I even have Jake. I got 2 guys at the counter now, and Jay likes being in the back, but he's also like a multi-tool. Like if I'm short-handed up front, he can come do that stuff, and he comes up and he's great with customers, and he can talk to people and be personable. And then he can look up your parts or ring you up or schedule your work. And he's become a huge asset to us in that way.
We're gonna have to have him on now that
You should.
I was like,
You should, yeah.
I've had so much fun talking to him at the shop.
Yeah.
We need to have him on and talk to him more.
He's a good dude, man. He's one of the best. Like I said, he really is. I honestly consider him like a brother at this point, and I don't say that about a lot of people. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I'll say it about him, and and I love the dude, and he's been such a big part of the Tucker Speed evolution. I don't even think he realizes it, But yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
I like having him, there. So yeah.
Well, we don't want to take up your whole night. We've gotten to some of the things on our list.
Hey, let's go. I don't have anywhere to be, man. I mean,
well, let's talk about some of your, because you started as a shop,
Mhm.
but then you kind of start growing your
yeah,
circle of influence. So you've got your online store.
Yep.
You have your YouTube channel. You have your podcast. You have racing and multiple types of racing. So how did that kind of start? What was the first kind of inkling of like, I want to do more than just shop stuff?
it's funny you ask because actually just yesterday morning, we shot a podcast with me and Jason and my younger brother TJ, and it was kind of weird because the 3 of us haven't really sat, because in those early years it was me and TJ and JO that were grinding. We were the 3 doing 7 days a week, 12-hour days. Like, and we spent a lot of time together, right? We just really hadn't sat down and talked for a couple years. But we started talking about it all. So to answer your question, it was 2017. At this point, we had just been grinding, just work. Like no vacations, no time off, just work. And Jason, I think it was him that was like, "Hey man, have you ever heard of this show in Milwaukee called Mama Tried?"
Dude, I want to go so bad.
And I was like, I mean, I've seen some stuff about it. Like, what's up? So we started looking into it, and we're like, yeah, man, like it's cool. Like it's in February. Like that's easy because it's our slow time of year. Like, yeah, man, let's just take off a few days and go to Milwaukee and go to the Mama Tried show. So we planned it, and the 3 of us, Jason and TJ and all of our wives, the 6 of us fly out to Milwaukee for the Mama Tried show, and we're there, and we get in on Tuesday. I think we got in on Thursday. I think Thursday we went into the museum, the Harley Museum, and toured it. Friday we're like sitting around, and we're like, what are we gonna do today? And we're like looking it up, and we're like, well, like as part of the Mama Tried weekend, they have this like flat out Friday thing. Like, what is this? And it's a flat track race. We're like, well, let's just go to that. Like, we don't have anything to do today. Let's go to the race. So we buy tickets and we go across town, and it's in their basketball arena, and it's Coke syrup racing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's flat track racing inside a basketball arena on the concrete floor that they, like the day before, they go in and they coat the floor in Coke syrup, and then they let it set up, and it's sticky.
Kind of like a drag track.
Like a drag track. Like, I mean, you walk out on that stuff and it'll like pull your shoes off, We're just sitting in the stands as spectators, and the show goes on, and we're just like, holy, this is so cool. and me and my brother, like, and at this point I hadn't been racing anything in a few years. Like, we had kind of hung up drag racing. I hadn't raced motocross in a long time. I hadn't raced anything, and I just had this bug to go racing. And we're sitting there, and I look at my brother, and I'm like, we're doing this. we're going home and we're building one of these. Because that was the first time I really saw, like I had built that Sportster of mine, you know, and I still owned it at that time. But that's the first time I had ever seen like a Sportster turned into like a dirt tracker. And I'm like, we're doing this.
Were you like, I've done that. That's my bike.
A lot. Yeah. I'm like, I know how to do that. I know how to build one of those. And it was almost like I built that Sportster and I rode it to work at the dealership and almost got laughed at, right? But then I show up at this race and I'm like, these are my people. Like this is what I was trying to be, and everybody laughed at me at home. Like I just felt like I was in the right place at the right time. Like I found this place, this community of people that like looked at things the way I did, and I'm like, I'm not alone in this. Like this is what I want to do. And I was ready to go racing, and it was like, okay, flat track is kind of like this perfect blend of like racing motocross, but I was riding, you know, Hondas. But I'm like, but I'm a Harley dude. But now I get to go racing, and it's on a Harley. Like this is just me in a nutshell, right? And so yeah, we went home. We bought a couple of old beat up Sportsters, turned them into dirt track bikes, and the next year in February we raced Flat Out Friday.
Sweet.
And then that same weekend we went to Mama Tried and saw the show. And that's really when like the light bulb for me went off. Like at that race and at that show, it was like, man, there's more to this industry than just trying to work on. Because at that point we were still working on dirt bikes and ATVs and everything, right? I'm like, there's more to this industry than just like trying to get whatever work we can out of Weber County, Utah. You know what I mean? It can be bigger than that. There were other independent shops and brands there, and I'm like, oh, that's how I want to do it. And then the rest of it just kind of, it all stemmed from that weekend. You know, that was a light bulb weekend for me.
So it opened your eyes to
it opened my
potential.
Eyes. Yeah, like what we could do, what we wanted to do. So we started racing. Racing was the first thing. We went home and we bought bikes. We started dirt tracking, traveling around the country. The more races we went to, the more shops we seen, the more people we met, the more conversations we had, the more networking we did. And every time we would come home, it was like, oh, we're going to do this. Oh, we're going to do that. And it just kept snowballing, you know. And it's just been, you know, off to the races literally since 2017. So much so that I raced flat track in the X Games in 2018. I grew up, like I said, I raced BMX. I raced motocross. Like I watched like the freestyle motocross scene like be born and come a thing. Like that, I grew up in that age. Like X Games were something you only seen on TV. And when I show up at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis in 2018, and they shuffle me in the back door through the athlete entrance, and I get all this free swag, and they hang this badge on me that says X Games athlete. Like that's pretty cool. Like that
dream
was like
that was the dream come true.
Oh, for sure, man. I was like on cloud nine, man. I was like, I had made it at that point. I mean, and I sucked. I mean, and we had to qualify for that race. Like you had to go through this qualifier race.
I mean, you did good enough to get there.
I barely got in. I really didn't think I was going to. They held the qualifier actually in Boise. And I hadn't done, this was 2018. Mind you, it was February of 17. I was spectating flat track, and then in the summer of 18, I was at X Games. So I hadn't done a lot yet.
You just barely built the bike.
Pretty much. It was the spring of 18. They were like, "Hey, we're having this flat track or this X Games qualifier. We're going to hold it in Boise." I'm like, "Well, that's close. Like, let's just go race it. Like, we're probably not going to qualify because like all the fast riders from the country are going to be there." And I'm like, I'll just go race it. It's close to home. Like, just run up the highway and race for a night and come home. And the way there was these heats, and I got third in my heat, which was like they took the top two, and then third was like the first loser. So like everybody from third back goes into this like last chance qualifier round, and then they take the top 2 out of the LCQ. And I was sitting third in the LCQ, and I'm just like we're just spinning laps, and I'm just like watching my dreams just like in front of me, just like those 2 guys. And the last lap, the dude in the front goes down.
Oh man. And
I got in just that close. It was literally the last lap, and he wipes out, and I take over second place, and I qualified for X Games.
That's so cool.
In 2 months,
you just got to take your chance, man.
I just went for it. One of those things that like you just don't talk about.
If you would have sat on your couch and done nothing, you wouldn't have made it.
I never would have
You've just been watching the X Games. You wouldn't be sitting there.
Yeah. And I put myself in a position that allowed it to be a possibility, and it happened.
It's funny you say that. I have a soldier in my unit that we have these soldier of the month, soldier of the year, soldier of the battalion, soldier whatever competitions. They have marksmanship and rucking and fitness and medical stuff, and they do all these things to show that they're a really good soldier. And he just went, like, they gave him no warning. They're like, hey, we need someone from your unit. And he went, and he got second. But then the first place guy's like, yeah, I'm not going on to the next competition, because every time you win, you go to the next echelon of competition. And then he got second in the next one, but then that guy got sick. And so he went to the next one. And at that point, it was the state level. In the state, you have Air Force and Army that compete. And the Air Force guy got first, and he got second. So he gets to go to the next Army level. It's like second. I mean, we're all, he's in our section. We're all the medics, and we're like, yeah.
Just got to, it's just, first step is to just get there, right?
Yeah.
Just be there. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's really where it all started. The e-commerce thing's a whole nother ball of wax. I was so anti website or online, kind of commerce. I had grown up like going to the local dealerships and buying parts from the independent shops around town. And I was kind of like this diehard, like, oh, you don't buy your motorcycle parts online. That's just not, like, if you want to buy parts, you drive down to the dealership and you belly up to the parts counter and you chat it up with the parts guy and you order parts, and that's how it's done. Like, I was so anti-online, and like even so much when I was at Golden Spike and I was the parts manager, I hated it because we were selling parts, but we were really kind of like,
were you just facilitating an online order for them?
No, we weren't selling online there.
Oh, okay.
But we were competing against that. That was
gotcha.
Like, this was in 2010, 2011, 2012 when I was parts manager. And, that's really when like online sales were like really becoming like really heavy, like really competitive. And a lot of people were buying online at that point. And it just absolutely drove me nuts, because we would have people come in like we would literally have people come in to the parts department, ask me like, hey, I want to do this, and this to my bike. I'm like, okay, cool. Look up all these parts and like, cool, I'm going to just go buy them online because they're cheaper. And I'm left there standing like,
what?
Like, what the hell? Like, I just did all the work and you're just going to go buy it online because you can save 10%. And I hated it. I was absolutely just hated it.
Like, I'll just give you the 10% here. Just buy it from me.
Yeah. And it's just the way it was. And I was so anti, even when I opened my shop, I was still thinking that way. And to a point, it just got to a point where I was just like, you know what? This is just the way it works anymore. That's where people are shopping, is online. And if I want to survive, I need to sell parts in that arena as well. And so we opened the online store. And it's been a huge kind of addition to our business. So, yeah, that's
awesome.
it. I still hate it, but it is what it is. I would still encourage anybody to go down to the parts store and talk to their local parts guy.
Yeah.
Build a relationship with that guy.
I feel like that, unless it's something that I'm just like, whatever, the majority of the time I'm always, go down and say, hey, this is what I need. Do you recommend anything different?
Yeah.
Like, and if they have anything that's like better than what I'm looking for, then
Yeah.
shoot, yeah, let's do that instead, you know?
Well, and you know, that was how you learned how to do stuff too back in the day. You couldn't buy this part on, you know, website X and then go to YouTube and say, how do I install this part?
Mm-hmm.
You went down to the parts store and you said, hey, I want to buy this. Have you ever, and you would just ask the guy, how do I install it? Like, how does this work? And that's how you learn. Like, it was that like face-to-face human contact, human interaction. And that, a lot of that's just gone,
Yep.
you know? And maybe I'm trying to preserve it. I try and run my shop like an old ma and pa. You want to come in, talk to our parts guys, come in, talk to me. I encourage my guys to have those conversations, you know? I mean, but it's tough, man. It's just the majority of people are just not, it's just not how they work anymore.
Yeah. Sadly,
So,
that's the way the world is.
it is.
And we've just gotten so freaking lazy that it's
And
look it up and you click buy and send it to the house.
I probably did it today. I mean, I am guilty of the very thing that I despise.
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing with what Zach was saying is like, you know, you guys can give us advice on something that we're looking at, but also at the same time, when you're watching those videos on YouTube, like, I just feel like you don't know who's been bought off at this point. Like, oh, we swear by this helmet that it's amazing, and then you buy it and it's a piece of junk, or like some part doesn't integrate well with the system, but somebody's been like, hey, if you talk about our part on YouTube, people will buy it and we'll pay you money, and then they're just like, yeah, this is the best thing on planet Earth. But we come to someone like you and you're like, that's a piece of junk. Don't put that on your bike.
Yeah.
Like, that's gonna fall apart or make your thing blow up, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's value in that. There definitely is. In just walking down or driving down to the local shop and just, you know, and build a relationship with those guys. Get to know them. Let them get to know you. And if they're willing to, they're going to help you out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough. It's just not the way the world works anymore. I hate to say it, but it's just, and I think a little bit of that will come back to an extent, but not like it was.
Yeah.
Those days are long gone.
Yeah. I think it is something that people will realize they're missing out on.
I hope so.
Like, when I bought my Harley, you guys were the first place I took it to. Like, I've never taken my bike to a dealership.
Okay.
And I would come home on my way from work to my house. I would stop at Tucker Speed on my way home from work to get parts or to see how much something was going to cost to fix or get done. And during the winter that I had my Harley, the first year, I had my bike at Gary's house, which was just down the road from you guys.
Okay.
And so I was constantly buying parts and then going and put them on my bike. And my wife would be calling like, where are you at? And I'm like, on my way home.
Yeah.
Like, I literally had like piles of boxes of parts that I was putting on my bike. And
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something special about being able to go to a local place. And I think it's just like what you say when you go to those events and you're seeing these like-minded people. Like, I get to meet really cool people that love the things I love, who are going to give me the best advice possible. And it's non-biased. Like, you have your own personal biases, but it's not a bought off bias.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I mean, you can, technically speaking, you can do that all online, right? Like, you can go on Facebook and you know, if you ride an ultra, you could go on Facebook and find a Facebook page that is just ultra riders, right?
Right.
And you could talk to those dudes and they're all like-minded. They all love the same motorcycle.
It's not the same.
But it's not
though.
the same.
Nah, it's like, it's
That's
true.
what I was gonna.
It's
You
true.
answered it before I could ask.
It's not
It's
the
true.
same.
Like, I'm on those pages.
Me too.
But I'm never I'm never going to see 90% of those people unless they're in Utah and like go to a meetup. Like, I'm never going to see that guy that's from California riding an ultra. I'm never going to see that guy.
It's a great way to make connections. But have you ever gotten anything from like one of those conversations versus like, you know, say you being at a bike night or a dealership, a party or whatever, you know, bike show, and you just like hit it off with a guy? Like, have you ever made those connections online like you did face to face?
No.
Or had those types of conversations? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would tell all your listeners, like, get off the computer, only come back to listen to your
Yeah.
podcast, but
get off the internet.
ride your
Go
motorcycle.
to our events.
Yeah, come down to, look up your local events and attend them and meet people.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that what motorcycling is to an extent? Like,
That's 90% of why I do it. It's the culture about
it's
it.
the culture. And that culture doesn't exist on social media. You can look at it on social media, but you're not in it. You want to be in it? Get on your bike and go down to the local bike show or rally or event or whatever's going on. Like, go do it.
Yeah.
Go ride.
I think
Go
that's
participate.
one of the things that we like to focus on is, the community that's behind it and, actually participating in the stuff because I mean, these people put out these events, but I mean, without, the community showing up, it's nothing.
It takes both sides.
Yeah.
And I've been on both sides of that table. I've been the one putting on the event and I've been the one attending the event. And both sides rely on the other.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it can be both sides don't appreciate the other side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're just attending an event, you don't realize what, maybe those people have put in to make that event happen.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're putting on an event, you might just be like, screw this, I'm over it. Like, I don't even care anymore. Like, and not appreciating the people who have taken the time to get on their bikes and come attend your event, right?
Yeah.
Like, it takes both. And that's what makes the world go round, right? Like, that's what keeps this culture alive. And it takes both sides. It takes people to put on events. It takes people to attend them, participate in them, support them, purchase things from them, donate to the charities or whatever it is they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Just participate. Goes a long ways.
Yeah,
So,
I couldn't agree more.
Well, Tony, we're grateful for your time.
Yeah.
And I feel like we could just talk for hours and hours and hours, but I hope you've enjoyed your time with us.
Yeah.
And we'd love to have you back on the show to
Anytime.
talk more.
Yeah.
Because I feel like everything we've touched on, we could have a whole separate episode on. So we hope to have you back sometime soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. Love to be back. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Appreciate it.
But thank you for listening to this episode of the Beehive Biker Podcast. We're going to close it out for today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.